Hello, Toros. Welcome to another day in history class. Today is March 30th, 2021. Welcome to this thankful, terrific Tuesday. So, today we're going to be looking at the Reconstruction Amendments. So, in your digital resource that we were working on yesterday, you should be at the Reconstruction Amendments. Yesterday, we talked about the definition of Reconstruction and the problems and solutions that were dealt with during Reconstruction. And we looked at the assassination of Lincoln as well as what Reconstruction was. So let's take a look at some of the other information. I want to key in on some of the important people whom you guys looked at yesterday. So let's go back just a little bit into yesterday's lesson. There were three important people that we talked about yesterday. And so I want to make sure that we key in who those were. That is Abraham Lincoln, who was the 16th president, who was assassinated at the end of the Civil War. So, right at the end of the Civil War, just after the surrender, um, Lincoln was assassinated. So, it killed his plans for a peaceful return to the South to the Union. We also talked about Andrew Johnson, who became president after Lincoln's assassination, and who was only had very few requirements to allow the South back into the Union. And if we remember, if we looked at the presidential reconstruction, those right here where it says abolish slavery, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, swear loyalty to the United States, and pay off war debt. Those were the three requirements that Andrew Johnson required of individual states to return back to the Union. Um, Remember, he was not very strong in his in enforcing the laws that were passed during this time, and so a lot didn't change within the South because of some of the actions in which he made or a lack of. He vetoed bills that would have benefited the newly freed African Americans the in America at that time. When we looked at radical Reconstruction with the Congressional Reconstruction Plan, um, even though Johnson vetoed the Reconstruction Act of 1867, Congress was still able to pass it with on top of that presidential veto. And so another person after that comes into mind, and that is Hiram Rhodes Rebel, who became the first African American to serve in the U.S. Congress when he was elected to the U.S. Senate. So, because of the Reconstruction Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1866, he was able to run and win a seat in the U.S. Senate. And so that takes us to where we are today with the Reconstruction Amendments. The Reconstruction Amendments are the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution. They were adopted between 1865 and 1870, the 5 years immediately following the Civil War. The amendments were passed to give African Americans rights that had been denied during the years of enslavement. The goals of the Reconstruction Amendments were to transform the United States from a country that was half slave and half free, in the words of Lincoln, um, to one in which the guarantees or blessings of liberty from the Constitution would be extended to the entire nation, including former enslaved Americans. So it was intended to level the playing field for both free and formerly enslaved people. the 13th Amendment, 1865, abolished slavery. That means it ended slavery. The 14th Amendment, 1868, addressed citizenship rights and equal protection of the law. So the 14th Amendment um, guaranteed citizenship rights to the former enslaved African Americans. So now that every freed enslaved person was now considered a citizen. And if we remember back when we talked about Dred Scott in that court decision, remember Dred Scott was proven to be property, not a citizen. And because he was not a citizen and declared property, he didn't have any rights. So now we have overthrown the ruling in that case. So now freedmen or enslaved people or formerly enslaved people have now been declared citizens. The 15th Amendment, 1870, prohibits discrimination in voting rights of citizens on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So, regardless if I was free or I was formerly enslaved, you can no longer use that against me and say that I cannot vote. So now we remember the 13th Amendment because it set the enslaved people free. 14th Amendment, it gave them citizenships, and the 15th Amendment gave them the right to vote. And the way we remember these, free citizens vote. That's the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. These amendments were intended to guarantee freedom to former enslaved men and women and to establish the prevention, discrimination, um, while these amendments were passed, state and federal regulations also passed laws called Jim Crow laws that limited the rights of African Americans. While constitutionally African Americans were given rights, in actuality they suffered many of the same discriminations and hardships endured while in slavery. And this was because of Andrew Jackson's lack of enforcement of the laws, because he believed that the states had the right to form their own governments and do kind of what they will. And so it caused issues with the plans that the Congressional Reconstruction Plan was doing during this time. So which amendment overturned the Dred Scott decision and how? Well, when we look back at the Dred Scott case again, we remember it had to deal with citizenship. So that would be the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment addressed citizenship rights and equal protection of laws to all formerly enslaved people. Because the law guaranteed that they were citizens, and in the Dred Scott case, they had declared that he was property, not a citizen. What goal was the Reconstruction Amendments? Well, if we look back at this sentence right here in that first paragraph, the goals of the Reconstruction Amendment were to transform the United States from a country that was half slave and half free to one in which the guarantees, blessings of liberty from the Constitution will be extended to their entire nation, including former enslaved African Americans. That's the goal. Do you believe they achieved the goal? That's a question for you to answer. Why do you think African American males were granted the right to vote but not women? When we think about it, why would they give African American women the right to vote when white women did not have the right to vote at this time either? So they it would be harsh for them to give the African American women the right to vote, and the white women still did not have the right to vote. So let's look at a little bit more in detail the 13th Amendment. In 1863, President Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation declaring all persons held in slave states with any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall be in rebellion against the United States. So that means those states who were a part of the Confederacy shall be thenceforth and forever free. So the Emancipation Proclamation only freed slaves in the Confederate States. The 13th Amendment freed slaves all across the United States. Nonetheless, the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery in the nation. Lincoln realized that the Emancipation Proclamation would have to be followed by a constitutional amendment in order to guarantee the abolishment of slavery. The 13th Amendment, which formally abolished slavery in the United States, passed the Senate on April 8, 1864, and the House on January 31st, 1865. On February 1st, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln approved the joint resolution of Congress submitting the proposed amendment to the state legislators. The necessary number of states to ratify it by December 6, 1865. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall be been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So this means that as long as you had not committed a crime and been sent to jail or being convicted, you were free. Now that's that loophole in the 13th Amendment. If you guys ever get a chance, there is a movie titled The 13th. It should be on Netflix. I would advise you to watch it. It's actually a really good documentary about the 13th Amendment, and it talks about this particular phrase right here. The 13th Amendment was passed at the end of the Civil War before the southern states had been restored to the Union. It should have easily passed in Congress but failed. Although the Senate passed the amendment in 1864, the House of Representatives did not. Discouraged with the failure of the amendment, Lincoln took an active role to ensure passage through Congress. He insisted that passage of the 13th Amendment be added to the Republican Party platform for the upcoming presidential elections. His efforts met with success when the House passed the bill in January 1865 with a vote of 119 to 56. With the adoption of the 13th Amendment, the United States found a final constitutional solution to the issue of slavery. The 13th Amendment, along with the 14th and 15th, is one of the trio of Civil War amendments that greatly expanded the civil rights of Americans. So go ahead and answer the questions at the bottom of this page. All of them have to do with the readings and the information about the 13th Amendment. When the 13th Amendment failed to pass, War Department official Charles A. Dana recalled that the president was already thinking ahead to the next vote. Lincoln was a supreme politician. He understood politics because he understood human nature. I had an illustration of this in the spring of 1864. The administration had decided that the Constitution of the United States should be amended so that slavery should be prohibited. This was not only change in our national policy, it was also a most important military measure. It was intended not merely as a means of abolishing slavery forever, but as a means of affecting the judgment of the feelings and the anticipations of those in rebellion. It was believed that such an amendment to the Constitution would be equivalent to new armies in the field, that it would be worth at least 1,000,000 men, that it would be an intellectual army that would tend to paralyze the enemy and break the country of his continuity of his ideas. In order thus to amend the Constitution, it was necessary first to have the proposed amendment approved by 3/4 of the states. When the question came to be considered, the issue was seen to be so close that one state more was necessary. The state of Nevada was organized and admitted to the Union to answer that purpose. I have sometimes heard people complain of Nevada, a superfluous and petty, not big enough to be a state. But when I hear that complaint, I always hear Abraham Lincoln saying, "It is easier to admit Nevada than to raise another million of soldiers." So you guys are going to go ahead and answer those questions. You see there is a text box missing here. If you would go ahead and just copy this text box and move it and add it here, that would be sufficient for you to answer that question. The 14th Amendment. Um, Amendment 14, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges of immunities or citizenships of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So you guys will go through and complete these 3 questions based on what we just read. Okay, so let's go back and let's review these amendments. If you guys click this link, it'll take you to some information about the amendments. But all you guys need to do is just tell me what happened as a result of the 13th Amendment. What did the 13th Amendment do? What did the 14th Amendment do? What did the 15th Amendment do? So if you need to go back to the readings that we looked at about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, please do so. Just be able to tell me what they did. All right, guys. So in review, we talked about the Reconstruction Amendments. That was the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We talked about the key people, Andrew Johnson, Hiram Rose Revels, and Abraham Lincoln. Remember, we used the term free citizens vote. Remember, the 13th set them free, the 14th gave them citizenship, and the 15th Amendment gave them the right to vote. So in your activities today, so make sure once you finish up the information in the reading that you come back and you do the Reconstruction Amendments. What were they designed to do? Tell me what the 13th Amendment was, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. And again, guys, that's our lesson for today. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to working with you more. Have a great one.